Today I'm going to go over your final essay. It is quite a large project, so there's a lot of very specific instructions that you really want to pay attention to make sure that you're doing the right things all the way through. So I'm going to jump on over to Blackboard. So inside of the learning modules, you should see Module 3 open up. Module 3 is the research essay. And I had to change the overview a little bit because it is so long and detailed. So instead of just putting the overview where you could see it right here, I just turned it into a PDF. And when you look at it, you'll understand why I did that. So this is the module overview. So it's very detailed. There's a lot of stuff on it here. And I just thought it would take up way too much space at the very top of the module page here. So just a PDF instead. But if you look at the module overview, it breaks down what you should be doing every single day for every single kind of assignment throughout this module. And so today we're going to talk about what the research essay is, go over the very specific instructions that it has, and then we're going to go over the first few reading assignments from here. What I'm doing with this one, because a lot of this information is new to a lot of people, instead of having you read it and getting confused by it, I'm going to go over it in class, and then you can kind of review the readings as needed for yourselves. So today we're going to talk about the definition of research essay, talking about the purpose of research, how not to approach a research essay, the general research process, and then how to develop a research question. So by the end of today's lesson, all of this should make a lot of sense. And then your homework is just simply to reread the research essay instructions. It's multiple pages. So you want to make sure you fully understand everything that's expected from you for this essay before you start to do any work for it. And then you have a free writing assignment. So you're going to choose a research topic, and I give you a big list to choose from that I'm going to show you in a second. And you're just going to do a one-page free write, double spaced. And the purpose, it says, excuse me, is to help you kind of narrow down what it is you actually want to write about or what you might want to write about. So there's a big list of topics. You're going to choose one or choose a couple and kind of free write about them to kind of decide on which one you want to pursue for this essay. And so going back to here as well. So these are the research essay instructions. I will go back to these a number of times during this whole module here. And so if you look at these, as I said before, it is a fairly lengthy document, but understanding the very specific instructions are very important, okay? So it says directions. Choose a topic from the research topic ideas on the following page and follow the directions, all right? So the next page, these are all the research topics, right? These in themselves are not thesis statements or things like that. These are broad areas that you're going to have to work at to narrow down to a reasonable thesis statement. So you want to definitely spend some time going over this list, looking through the ones that are interesting to you, something you might want to find out some more about, anything like that. So you're just going to pick one of these. Let's say food safety. I don't know why. No, that's boring. I don't like that. Freedom of speech. That's better. So freedom of speech is a topic idea. If you had freedom of speech as your thesis statement, that would be at least a book. All right. That'd be at least several hundred pages because it's a huge topic. So your goal throughout this research process is to narrow that down to a specific topic that you can write the essay about. So once you've chosen your topic, you're going to do all these things. So it says the process, because it really does kind of help you step by step get to it. So you're going to read a number of articles about your topic. Then it's going to be up to you to create an assertion. This is your arguable thesis. This is the claim, okay? Your claim is what you're trying to prove throughout the entire essay, right? So your thesis statement is going to say, it's going to be an argumentative thesis statement. So you're going to make a stand on a position about something that someone could reasonably disagree with you about. And then you're going to spend the entire essay trying to support your point of view, right? Your claim cannot be a question, right? So if we're talking about freedom of speech, your thesis statement can't be, do you think we have enough freedom of speech in the United States? Because that's a question, right? And a simple answer isn't what you want, right? You want to make sure it's a claim, it's a statement. And for a lot of you, it might be easier to pose a thesis question about your topic. We're going to go over how to find one of those in a minute. It says, then the answer to your thesis question can become your thesis statement. It can become your assertion. So for example, the question, is poverty a factor in determining academic success? That's a question, right? But by answering that question yourself, you could come up with a statement that poverty is a major factor in determining academic success. And then you says, okay, so this is my main point. This is my thesis. I think I can write 5 to 7 pages about how poverty influences academic success, right? Because generally, students that grow up in more impoverished areas don't do as well academically as middle class or upper class students, right? And there's a ton of reasons for that. And this paper would analyze all those different reasons, right? So it's your job to support that claim through carefully crafted arguments, right? This is an argumentative paper. What you don't want to do, if you've written a research paper before, it's probably the kind that you did, where you're just listing a bunch of details and facts about something. This isn't that kind of paper, right? Everything you're writing in this paper is argumentative, right? You're trying to prove the point that you made in your thesis statement. Right? So the entire essay is going to be about using information to help support your claim. So each of your arguments will be fully supported with documented evidence, right? So you can use a little bit of like firsthand experiences and things like that, but the vast majority, the bulk of the essay is going to come from documented evidence. And this is from outside sources. So you're going to use quotes, you're going to use summaries, you're going to use paraphrases, all from these outside sources that you're finding, okay? And then you must analyze your position from multiple perspectives to avoid bias and create the strongest possible support. So anytime you're arguing for something in an academic research paper, you don't want to sound like a bully. You don't want to sound like, my opinion is the best and everything I say is perfect and you're wrong and you're stupid, right? You do want to open up the door a little bit to a possible opposing side, right? So if you just say, this is why I'm right, this is why I'm right, this is why I'm right, it's not very convincing. But if you say, this is why I'm right, this is why I'm right, this is why I'm right, this is why some people think I'm wrong, but this is why those people are wrong. So you're allowing the counter evidence to come into play in order for you to then kind of attack that counter claim, right? A lot of people love doing this kind of stuff. It's fun to do. If you've never done it before, it can be difficult. So you want to definitely follow the process, okay? So then the requirements for this one. So the essay must reflect thorough investigation, complex thought, effective synthesis of multiple perspectives, and correct MLA documentation. Okay. And this sounds really fancy, but everything that you've been doing, thinking about how to write an academic paper, thinking about complex topics, using synthesis, so combining ideas from different places to support the same types of things. And now we're going to do a lot of the MLA formatting. So that's the works cited pages, that's the in-text citations, all that jazz. You're required to use at least 8 credible outside sources in your essay. So at least 8. You can use as many as you want, but you have to use at least 8 outside sources in your essay. Out of these 8, at least 4 of them must be scholarly peer-reviewed articles from the databases. If you've never used the library database before, it's okay. I'm going to show you exactly how to use the JCC one. It's not nearly as user-friendly as Google, unfortunately, but once you understand how it functions, it's not hard to use. So I'm going to show you all the good tips and tricks to make this much easier. But at least 8 outside sources, and at least 4 of those have to be scholarly articles. If you use 16 outside sources, you still only have to use 4 peer-reviewed articles. You can use as many as you want here. If you use 8 sources and all 8 of them come from the databases, that's perfectly fine too. It's just a minimum of at least 4 of them have to come from the databases. Each body paragraph must use at least 1 source for support. So you're never going to have a paragraph that's purely just your opinion, right? You're going to have an outside source embedded into every single one of your body paragraphs. Minimum pages is 5, so you want to shoot between the 5 and 7 page range. This does not include the works cited page. So if you only write 5 pages, the works cited page will be your page 6. If you write 7 pages, your works cited page will be on page 8, and anything in between, all right? The grading for this one is unique because it's broken down by all these different categories, right? So the percentage is what each one of these areas is worth, okay? So you can spend some time going over this if you want to, but I just wanted to make sure you knew well in advance how your grade is going to be done. So if you look kind of down here at the bottom, you see a large portion of it is for documentation. So are you using MLA style? Are you using good, credible sources? Did you use at least 4 of these peer-reviewed database articles? And then how well did you use the sources? How well did you integrate outside information with your writing? So you see this all combined is worth a pretty good chunk of the essay because these are the skills that we really want you to learn for this kind of essay. All this stuff, this is stuff you've already been doing, all right? Excuse me. Really important. Unless I give you extra special permission, you can't use a topic that you've already written about, right? So if you wrote about something about one of these topics for, the first essay, you can't do that when you have to choose a different topic. And then going through here, I'm not going to read through all these because you can read all these yourselves, but these are all topics, right? I want to make that really, really clear. These are not thesis ideas. These are topics, okay? So if we have big box stores, all right? So we're talking about like Walmart, things like that. So in itself, it's not a thesis. It's just a topic, right? If you chose to write about big box stores, maybe you could talk about not just big box stores, but maybe all the big giants, right? Because like Amazon is like the largest retailer in the United States, maybe in the planet, I'm not sure. So you could write an argumentative essay about some kind of impact that Amazon is having on small towns in small grocery stores or something like that, right? That's something very specific that you pulled out of the topic of big box stores, right? Same thing with like learning disabilities. You don't want to write a whole paper about learning disabilities as a topic. It's way too big, right? This would be a whole series of books. But if you want to write a whole essay talking about specific types of learning disabilities and how they can make gaining a higher education more difficult for certain people, that's a very specific kind of subtopic underneath that broad umbrella of learning disabilities, right? And so part of the work you're going to do is learning how to narrow down a topic into a manageable thesis statement. So spend time going through this, right? Right away, you're going to have to choose a topic. And the sooner you pick one that you actually want to write about, that you want to learn some more about, that you have an interest in, it's going to be so much easier, right? So just kind of look through these. If you really want to write about something and you don't know if it fits one of these topics, you can just ask me. You can send me an email saying, hey, I was thinking about writing about this. It'll take me 2 seconds to say, yeah, go for it. Or no, that's a terrible idea. All right. So then starting on this page, and this is one of your assignments. It's a major part of the assignment. It's called a research proposal. Okay. And this is a very specific step-by-step instruction on how to write a research proposal. This is something you're going to submit, and actually it's worth 10% of your total grade, not 10% of the essay grade, 10% of your total grade. So if you do not submit the research proposal, you're losing an entire letter grade on your final average. Don't do that, right? The purpose of the proposal is to make sure that you know what you're doing and that I can see if you're headed in the right direction before you waste too much time writing the essay, right? So the proposal is designed to make you more successful in the essay. In a proposal, well, this kind of proposal will have these 7 different steps, okay? You'll have the identification of a topic or your topic area. You'll have your research question, which you'll formulate yourself. Any background knowledge that you already know about the topic. A brief discussion of at least 2 articles that you've read on the topic. Remember, brief discussion. You don't have to summarize the entire 2 articles. Just briefly discuss them. Include the works cited entries for those 2 articles. Identify what your research goals are, and then create a possible outline for your paper. So all of you will have these 7 steps in your research proposal. And then right below it here is an example. So your proposal will look very similar to this, just on a different topic, all right? So my topic here was social mobility and poverty, right? That's a topic, that's a huge category. My question, why is it so difficult to improve one's socioeconomic class? In other words, why is it so hard that if you're poor to get out of poverty? Why is that so difficult, right? And so background knowledge on the topic, I just kind of did some free write, right? I just kind of wrote a little bit about the stuff that I already know about in terms of this topic of social mobility and poverty. So it's brief, it's like a short paragraph, and that's all that is. And then I read a few articles. And so I just wrote a couple of paragraphs, one for each of the 2 articles, right? Really short, really to the point, just making sure that whoever is reading this understands, hey, I read this article and this is something I thought about it. And I read this article and this is something that I thought I might be able to use, or it was interesting, or I want to find out more, whatever it is, right? It really is kind of a discussion between you and me. And then the works cited entries. So literally just like they would appear on your works cited page at the end, you're going to have these here. And again, I'm going to show you how to create these. And then your research goals. And so you think about this, and looking at this example is a good one, right? Because it's hard to identify your goals if you've never done a research paper before. Like, well, my goal is to write a good research paper. And that is the goal. I mean, ideally, that is the goal, but how do you reach that point, right? And so I wrote this. I hope to find credible sources that will help me support what I already think. There are multiple reasons why people cannot get out of poverty. I think many of these reasons are about hard work and motivation, but I also think that for certain groups of people in certain places, no amount of hard work and motivation will make a difference. Some people start off with so many things going against them for them to do it alone, and I hope to prove that, right? So this is what I'm going to spend time doing more and more research on, right? And then just a possible outline, right? So you're going to have an introduction paragraph with your thesis. I'm going to summarize what poverty means in America. One of my paragraphs is going to be about how birth can influence your economic struggle. One of them is going to be about how location can determine your social mobility. Because you think about if you live in a very large city, there are more opportunities. If you're in New York City, there's lots of ways to possibly get out of poverty. But if you live like way out in the middle of nowhere and there's only, 50 people that live in your village, there's not a lot of room for mobility. There's not a lot of room to grow, right? Then I'll have a paragraph about how race impacts social mobility. Have a paragraph about how education plays a role in class, talk about how birth, location, and race can impact education in future classes, and then a conclusion, right? So just a really brief outline. But by doing this, it helps keep me kind of focused and on task. That every time that I'm reading, I'm doing some research, I'm going to look up stuff about this, right? And it's going to fit in that paragraph. And I'm going to look up stuff about this, and it's going to fit in that paragraph. So doing this really helps you kind of stay focused while you're developing the actual essay yourself. Excuse me. Sorry. This one I just left on here. Most of this is covered in the stuff we're going to be talking about, but it's a really good kind of examples of like how to get started with it. And so we look at this, right? So if I have my claim is that zoos promote cruelty to animals, right? Recently, well, in the last 10 years, probably there's been a big backlash against zoos and like SeaWorld kind of animal theme parks, that kind of stuff. So zoos promote cruelty to animals, right? So it's there, it exists, it is a claim, right? It's argumentative. Someone could disagree with that, but I want to like narrow it down a little bit more. So now I say confining large marine mammals in sea parks for public amusement is a form of cruelty to animals. Because now in 5, 6, 7 pages, I can really focus on marine mammals. I can talk about Shamu, the killer whale and stuff like that, specifically about SeaWorld and other sea parks across the world, right? I can focus in 5, 6, 7 pages on this topic. If this is still my topic, if this is my thesis statement, I'm going to be writing at least a 30-page paper, at least, right? And you don't want to have to do that, right? So narrow down your topic to something that you could really do there, right? And then there's some other information down here that you can read on your own, right? But this, and I stress this because every semester I have a number of students, I don't know what happens, they just kind of miss the boat on it. So when you have to actually do your research proposal and turn it in, make sure you come back to these essay instructions and follow these 7 steps. Make sure you look at this example proposal and do something just like it, except with your topic. All right. So that's the instructions. And again, it's a lot of stuff, I know. So if I look at the module overview, again, it tells us what we're doing today, what your homework is, right? And so these first ones, all of these are inside of this first link. Right? There's a lot of stuff in both of these too. So both of these are kind of like the reading chapters for this module. So the first one, research and logical arguments. And these are in order of how you should learn and understand about them in order to be successful at the research paper, right? So it starts really simply, like research essay definition. What is that? Research purpose, how not to approach the research essay, what's the research process, that kind of stuff, right? So some of it, if you had a really good teacher like your senior year in high school, you might know some of this. Hopefully some of you do, but if you don't, it's okay, all right? And this is key. Understanding what a research essay is really, really important. Because if you don't fully understand what kind of paper this is, it's really easy to go way off track, way off track. All right. So this one, it says, a research paper is an essay that takes its support from research sources to back up your own observations, insights, analyses, and evaluations. This is really important, right? A research paper isn't reading a bunch of other articles and websites and just copying and pasting their information into the page, right? That's just creating a Wikipedia page, basically, right? What you're doing is you're using research, you're using outside sources to back up your ideas, your observations, your insights, right? So you're going to have a claim, an argumentative claim, and you're going to use outside information to back up what it is you already believe, right? Now, this is kind of tough because as you read and find out more, what you believe can and should change, right? Anytime you get new information, you should be able to kind of use that and integrate it with your own beliefs. And if you do that, it's possible that your thesis can be tweaked and can shift a little bit while you're actually doing research. Perfectly normal, and that's a good thing to do, right? And look at this here. Beginning research writers often think, erroneously or incorrectly, that the more research they can put into an essay, the better. However, an essay that's merely a series of quotes or pieces of information from sources strung together lacks the essential element of essay writing, your own thoughts and insights. All right. So always, like this, keep in mind, always think of this as it's still your paper. You are writing your paper. These are your ideas. These are your thoughts. These are your beliefs. All you're doing is backing up these ideas, beliefs, thoughts with credible outside information. All right. So it says, writing a research essay, this is key. All of these ones, right? Choose sources that directly address the issue. Use sources that deal not just with the topic of your thesis, but with the angle of your thesis, right? And remember, a thesis, just like a topic sentence, will always have that topic and the angle, right? If I say, poverty leads to a lack of education, right? Poverty is my topic. My angle is what I'm talking about in terms of poverty, that it can lead to a lack of education, right? So if that's my topic sentence, or if that's my thesis statement, that poverty leads to a lack of education, I can look up stuff on poverty, and I can look up stuff on education, and I can look up stuff that links poverty and education together, right? So you're not going to go to Google and say, how does poverty influence education, right? You're not going to find a lot of great stuff there, but you can find good ideas there. Then those ideas will help you find better information in more credible places, right? So thinking about the different ways to kind of analyze the issue, because you're not just writing an informative essay. You're not just defining things for the audience. You're trying to convince them that this claim that you're making is valid and well supported. What's the next one? And this is tough. Right? This is tough for a lot of people. The purpose of research is not to look for proofs that fit your pre-existing theories, but to learn about the subject of the investigation as much as possible, and then form or add to those theories, opinions, and arguments on the basis of this newly found knowledge and understanding, right? And people hate this, right? Because we believe things, whatever it is, we believe them. If you want to write your paper about police brutality, and you firmly believe that, the police should be defunded and they're all terrible human beings and they're all murderers and they're all racist, right? And then you read information that says, well, they're not all like that. There's actually a lot of things that are pretty positive in different places. You have to take that new information and say, okay, so my thesis can't be they're all terrible, they all need to be defunded, let's get rid of the police. Now you have to adapt your idea based on the information that you're reading about, right? The key part to this is using credible information, because you can believe anything you want. That aliens are real, that Joe Biden is one of the lizard people, any of these crazy conspiracy theories, you can find something that agrees with you, right? We all have access to Google. It's out there somewhere, right? But just because it exists out there somewhere doesn't mean it's good information. So you have to use credible information, peer-reviewed information that helps inform your belief about whatever it is you're talking about, right? Excuse me. And it can be tough. I'm not lying. I'm not going to lie. It's not easy. It can be tough. Okay. but this will help you kind of do it the right way. All right. If we look at this one, okay, and this is a good example of exactly what a lot of students do, right? How not to approach a research essay, right? You know, you have to do research. You can choose your own topic and you decide you're interested in finding out more about juvenile diabetes, since your niece was just diagnosed with this disease. Off to a good start, right? If you have a loved one that just got diagnosed with this, you might be interested in learning more about it and writing about it, right? So you go online to Wikipedia and to many other sources. You read a lot about juvenile diabetes. And after a couple of hours worth of reading, you feel that you know quite a bit about the condition. The information you learned falls into four main categories: causes, effects, treatments, and supports for patients, right? And if you look at any Wikipedia page for almost any medical thing, you're going to see causes, effects, treatments, and supports, right? So you decide you have enough for a research essay and you start developing a unit of support for each category based on what you remember from the sources until you have a 5-page essay drafted. So you wrote a paragraph about causes of juvenile diabetes. You wrote a paragraph about the effects of juvenile diabetes. You wrote a paragraph about the treatments for juvenile diabetes. You wrote a paragraph about the supports for patients with juvenile diabetes, right? And you're like, yeah, I got 5 pages. I wrote that. Yay. Then you list all your sources that you read at the end of the essay, even though you may or may not have used some of the concepts in the essay. And you throw a title at the top and you call it juvenile diabetes. And a lot of students do exactly this. And you write terrible, terrible research papers, right? Not because you wanted to write a terrible research paper, because you didn't fully understand what a research paper is and how to approach one, right? So then what's wrong with this? Well, one, there's no thesis with an angle or an assertion or a claim about the topic, right? They just wrote about juvenile diabetes. They wrote about the causes of it, the effects of it, the treatments, supports for patients. If anybody wants to read about that, why would they read your paper when they could just go and read the same Wikipedia page you looked at, right? That is not a research paper. That's just information. And information that doesn't have a purpose is not good for a research paper, all right? Obviously, they didn't care about citing their sources well because they didn't go back and make sure which part of which website they were using. They probably didn't quote properly. I'm sure they didn't really use the right in-text citations and all those things, right? It was just kind of like mix match together because it was hard for them to write a paper using ideas that weren't already inside of their head. And it can be tough. It really can be. But just make sure you don't do this, all right? If this is all you can do, then that's all you can do. It's a start, right? You read Wikipedia, you write about these 4 things. That's a start. Then I'm going to say, okay, now go back and find other articles about these things and think about how you could convert this, what you already have, into an actual thesis statement, right? How can you make something like this a claim? How can you make it arguable? How can you introduce an angle to the topic of juvenile diabetes, right? And so a lot of people, they'll come back and they'll say, oh, okay, well, I got this. And I want to write about juvenile diabetes and how it's increasing. And I'm like, well, that's technically a little bit better, but it is a fact that it's increasing. So it's still not argumentative, right? So you go back and you do a little bit more research, you do some more reading, and then you find an article maybe on the databases like, oh, this one is talking about that with the increase of 2-parent incomes where mom and dad aren't both at home or where nobody is at home, people are eating worse and worse and worse, and it's leading to an increase in juvenile diabetes. Now you have an angle, right? Now you're going to investigate how people that grow up in a household that don't have someone that's always there to take care of them, to cook for them and stuff like that, they eat worse or they eat a lot of sugary stuff or something like that. And that's leading to an increase in juvenile diabetes, right? Now that's interesting. You're not going to find a Wikipedia page just about that. Now it's a claim, right? Because someone could logically disagree and they could say, no, it's not because of the parents. It's because of the massive influx of cheaply affordable fast food. That's why it's growing, right? So even though they're not arguing against juvenile diabetes, they're saying it's for a different reason that it's increasing. That's an argument. That's a debatable topic now, right? And you can do the same thing with almost any topic, but the key is to recognize that you do or do not have an angle and make sure you have one, right? Don't accidentally write me a 5-page informative paper that does not have an angle, that is not argumentative, all right? I'm going to pause real quick there because that's really important. Questions about that? All right. I'm not gonna make you read that part. And so the research process, okay. And I like this little visual because it's pretty good. So it says define the topic, narrow your topic, gather background information, create a research question, develop a working thesis statement. Remember, that's a thesis that can change and shift a little bit. Find and evaluate your sources, cite your sources, write the paper. All right. And these really are all the major steps that you're going to take. But the reason I like this image is because it shows all these things as gears, right? So when this one turns, this one turns. When this one turns, this one turns. They're all interconnected, right? Now, I mean, physically, this wouldn't work because that gear system wouldn't work together like that. But the idea that everything you do has an impact on some other part of it. Does that make sense? Because you can easily like, okay, this is the topic I choose. This is what I really want to talk about. So I'm going to do some reading about it. I'm going to formulate a research question. And I think this is going to be my thesis statement. But then as you found some more outside sources, you said, well, this makes me change my thesis a little bit. So you go back to your working thesis statement, you change it a little bit, right? Maybe now you have to go back and read some more because your thesis changed. So now you need some more background information. Maybe you found something in one of your sources that you didn't fully understand, and you have to go find more information about that or define that thing in order to keep moving forward with the process, right? It's not a straight, start here, go here, go here, go here, and finish, right? It's a constant kind of back and forth throughout the process, okay? But this is basically what you want to do, right? And this one's really handy. Decide on a topic, super easy, right? And you're going to do that in your first assignment is to free write about your topic, right? When you're free writing, what you can be doing is kind of narrowing down your topic, right? So if you start with like a really, really big topic and you're like, I want to write about this topic, but I don't know specifically what within that topic I want to focus on. That's okay. Use your free writing to try to figure that out, right? And you want to think about a lot of different things, right? So it says here, for example, suppose you want to explore the topic of autism. You might move from general topic to a specific focus in the following way, right? Because again, autism is a giant topic, right? You can adequately address autism in 5, 6, 7 pages, right? So you got to narrow it down. So you have a general topic, special needs in a classroom in terms of autism, right? A little more limited, autistic students in a classroom setting. More specific, how technology can enhance learning for autistic students. Oh, okay. That's manageable in a 6-page paper, right? Because now you can just read and do a bunch of research about specifically how technology can improve learning for autistic students, right? Which is much more manageable than all of autism, right? It's a huge spectrum. You'll be writing this paper until you graduate, with your PhD probably. So you want to narrow it down and don't make it so specific that you paint yourself into a corner though, right? So how technology can enhance learning for autistic students is good, right? But if you said how iPads can enhance learning for autistic students, you might be too specific. Maybe not, right? Maybe you could really write 6 pages just about how iPads help autistic students. I don't know. But my gut tells me that's too specific. You're going to get about 3, 4 pages in, and then you're going to be out of things to write about because it's too specific, right? But if your thesis is how technology can enhance learning for autistic students, you can talk about iPads, you can talk about text-to-speech software, you can talk about all these different apps that people could use, any kind of thing you can think of, right? So it allows you to talk about more things, but it's still more specific than autism as a whole thing, right? Then you do your background research, right? And what I actually suggest you do is go to Wikipedia, right? Wikipedia is great because there's lots of information that's usually easy for the average person to read, right? Versus trying to read an academic essay on your topic that's filled with words that you don't even know the definition for, right? So Wikipedia is a great place to start background research, to understand the things about that topic, to maybe narrow down what it is you want to talk about in terms of that topic, right? Just do some research so you have some basis of information about that thing. Then you create your research question. Then you double check your research question, right? As you're reading more, is that still the question you're trying to answer? Or did you find out some new stuff and you're like, well, actually, what I really want to answer is this, not the one that I had previously thought was my research question. So then just keep tweaking it, right? Then you're going to create your working thesis statement, right? Then you're going to draft your own support for your working thesis statement. Okay. And this is what you really want to do before you use a bunch of outside sources. You've already read background information. You've probably read outside sources. But when you're drafting the essay, you don't want to include them yet because you want to put down, you want to make sure that your ideas are coming out in the paper, right? So keep in mind that a research essay is not simply confined to source information. Try to develop the basics of your essay and identify potential topic sentences and units of support even before you research, if you can, right? Because if you have a good idea, you have a good claim, you should be able to write a lot of this paper and then find the sources that are going to help support that, right? And then determine what kinds of sources are best for your argument. We'll get into more in this when we talk about actual different sources, but you want to think about some sources are better than others, right? Sometimes the academic essay is going to be the perfect one for this topic, but maybe for some other part, this awesome speech that you found on YouTube is going to be a great use of an outside source, right? And that's why only 4 of your sources have to be from the databases. The other 4 can come from pretty much wherever you want, as long as they're credible, right? Then you want to evaluate your sources, right? We're going to talk about how to properly evaluate a source for bias, for credibility, and then create your bibliography. In MLA formatting, your bibliography is known as your works cited page. It's the same term. We just do them differently. And then it's time to write your essay. Yay. And if you follow these steps, it really does help. It really, really does. All right. And thinking about that one in terms of how to begin, right? So all of these are about kind of the general overview about research writing, right? So it's really important to understand the bones of it before you really dive into starting yours, okay? So when you develop a research question, this can help you once you've analyzed the topic to kind of figure out what it is you might want to say, right? But I love these examples because it makes it really easy to see what I mean by like a good thesis versus a poor thesis, right? So these ones are all too easy. It's low stakes. It's not specific enough. What do people eat in Vietnam? Really? Really? Does anybody care? Unless you're writing for the Travel Channel, no one cares, right? It's just something. I could look this up on the internet right now and find out the answer. So why would I read your 7-page paper about it, right? A little higher stakes, more specific. What does Vietnamese food reflect about Vietnamese culture? Now that's a little more interesting, right? I can't just find that answer on Wikipedia, probably, right? Like that is more interesting. Like the types of food that people eat often reflect the culture, right? In many places all across the world. So I like that. It's a little more interesting, right? But if I'm talking about all of Vietnamese food and all of Vietnamese culture, that's still a little broad, right? That's probably a 15, 20-page paper, not a 5, 6, 7-page paper, right? So I can narrow it down even more specifically to an aspect of culture. How does Vietnamese cuisine reflect a history of colonialism? Oh, okay. Because when all the white people from Europe came over, it drastically changed the menu, the stuff that they eat, when they eat it, why they eat it, all that types of things, right? So this is a lot better now. Excuse me. But all of these are valid questions. And the key is to think about what is it that I can focus on within this kind of page range, and I can really get to the heart of it, right? This one too. Are people in the US more obese than they used to be? The answer is yes. Every single scientist on the planet knows that. You can Google it right now, and the US is fatter than ever. Yay, right? Have obesity rates in the US increased over the last 100 years? Well, that's more specific, but it's still really the same question, right? It sounds better, but it's really kind of the same, right? Because the answer is yes, it has increased over 100 years, right? So again, this is just too vague. It's not specific enough. But then if you revise it one more time, is there a correlation or a connection between obesity rates and economic instability in the US over the last 100 years? Like, oh, interesting. Because you think about this kind of stuff, and that's kind of what I was talking about earlier, where if you're raised in a household and both parents work and you don't really get to cook nutritious homemade meals, instead, mom or dad stopping by McDonald's on the way home from work because it's cheaper, right? They both have to work. That's part of economic instability, right? They need more income. And fast food is often cheaper than cooking a meal at home. Not always, but often, right? So now I can analyze and research the correlation or the connection between rising obesity rates and the economy over the last 100 years, right? Much more specific, right? Similarly, again here, what is the role of religion in the Middle East? Well, I hope you got 9,000 pages of paper to print out because that's how long it's going to take you, right? That is way too broad, all right? Let's narrow it down a little bit though. How has religion influenced politics in the Middle East in the last 50 years? Okay, this is much better. 50 years, religious influence on politics, right? Much more specific, a lot better. Still a book, right? This one was 7 books. This one is just 1 book, all right? So let's keep narrowing it down. Let's keep analyzing this, revising it. How has religion's influence on government impacted the day-to-day lives of Qatari citizens? So now not the entire Middle East, specifically Qatar or Qatar, I forget how you say it. So this you can manage within 6-7 pages, right? Because it's specifically the government, how religion has influenced the government, specifically on the citizens of a specific country in the Middle East. Much, much better, all right? So when you come up with your working question, think about it in terms of like this one. If it helps, go back to this page and look at these again and say, okay, my thesis question is kind of like this one. How can I make it more specific and make people care about it? Oh, okay. So that's better. And people might care about that, but it still might be too broad. It might be too much for a 5 to 7 page essay. There we go. Right. And do that same kind of thing with your research question. It's really going to help you. And the sooner you do this, the easier the rest of the essay is going to be. If you try to start doing research and start trying to write your essay before really narrowing down what it is you're trying to answer, it's going to be all over the map and you're going to waste so much time. Trust me. Right. And then this one, I mean, it's not the greatest graphic, but it's okay. So it talks about, your topic is like the big giant thing, the working knowledge, like what do you already know? What are you slowly learning about it? Your question or your questions that you're forming, and then ultimately your research question. And then the answer to your research question will lead you to your working thesis statement, right? So it's the same kind of steps mentioned on that other document, but this one's a nice little visual. So that's pretty good there, right? So we're looking at this one, and there's another example of how to get to something like this. Starting here, right? So this says Jacob began his project by identifying the following areas of interest. So he looked at like a list of possible topics, and he looked at racism in the US, technology and medicine and healthcare, and independent filmmaking. He just chose those 3 out of the list because he thought those looked the most interesting to him. And then he did some pre-writing, he did some Googling, a little bit of research, and he was like, you know what? I want to learn more about racially motivated police violence, right? So he's clearly chosen racism in the US. And now he's a little bit more specific, racially motivated police violence, right? So then he generates these questions, right? Are police officers likely to make judgments about citizens based on their race? That's a valid question, right? And the answer isn't yes or no, right? It can be yes because of these things, or yes in these instances, or it could be no for these reasons, or no in these instances. The purpose of asking these questions isn't to know the answer. It's to help you think of different angles for how you could talk about the topic, all right? Have police forces instituted policies to avoid racism? Who is most vulnerable to police violence? Who is responsible for overseeing the police? Notice how each one of these questions is a very different take on the topic of racially motivated police violence, right? Because you could write all this and never get to, well, who's responsible for watching them, right? And that could be a key piece in this essay, right? So asking these types of questions helps you come to some good answers, right? Excuse me. So he says he realized that he needed to narrow his focus to develop a more viable path, right? So he came down to this. Over the last 30 years, what populations are most likely to experience police violence in the United States, right? And this qualifier, 30 years, that's good, right? Because if you go way beyond that, like before, like the civil rights era, you can go all the way back to slavery if you want to. That's way too much, and it's going to skew the information. Because what Jacob here was probably interested in was modern day policing, right? So in the last 30 years, what populations are most likely to experience police violence in the US, right? Then he says, however, After completing more research, Jacob discovered that his answers came quite readily and consistently. Young Black men are significantly more vulnerable to become victims of police violence. He realized that he's not really saying anything new, so he had to tweak his path of inquiry, right? And if you've ever watched the news for more than 20 seconds, you know, it's young Black men, right? For lots of reasons, right? Again, don't overanalyze questions. This question, or the answer to this question that Jacob here was kind of looking at, didn't mean young Black men, right? All police attack young Black men. That's not what he's saying, right? So avoid like a gut reaction of like a yes, no, black and white kind of answer. So he did some more free writing, and then he came up with this. Have anti-racist police trainings and strategies been effective in reducing individual or institutional racism over the last 30 years, right? Because now the answer isn't simply young Black men, right? Now it's anti-racist police trainings and strategies. Are they effective? Are they not effective? Do they help reduce individual racism, or do they help reduce institutional racism, right? And so now there's a lot of different ways you can analyze this question to come up with your different topic sentences, right? Excuse me. But it does take work, right? You can't just say like, oh, I think this. You know, if you're looking at the, where did it go? If you're looking at this list and something pops out and you're like, drug policy, and you come up with a question, why is Watertown fighting against recreational marijuana sales, right? And the answer is because they don't want it. Yay, go deeper, right? So think about, you know, in terms of drug policy, in terms of, you know, if you want to write about local stuff, if you're talking about, you know, how you have to opt out, I forget what the terms, you have to opt out of it by the end of this year, I think it is, before it can be sold legally. Excuse me. Something about the other angles, like why would they want that? Why do some people not want it? Who would benefit from marijuana sales? Who might get hurt because of marijuana sales? And ask all these types of questions to really get to the heart of what it is you're trying to find out, right? If you're talking about teen suicide, that's a happy topic. So if you just say, you know, there are a lot of teen suicides in the US, that's just a fact, right? I mean, suicide is the leading cause of death for teenagers, right? I think it still is this year. So ask more questions, right? Why do so many teens commit suicide? Are there places across the country where it's more prevalent or less prevalent? Is it more prevalent in bigger cities or smaller cities? Is it more prevalent where it's colder, where it's warmer? How many teens that commit suicide come from broken homes? How many teens commit suicide had a history of sexual violence against them, right? These are the questions that get you to much deeper and really important answers, right? So when you're going through that, think about this one as well. Remember this one, developing a research question. Look at these kind of the two revisions of the original working question. Think about this kind of example in terms of how you can generate questions to help you discover what the things you want to look at are, right? And just think about those things here. This video is pretty good. This one's okay too. They're kind of dry. But if you're still struggling with this and understanding how to formulate questions that you could ask yourself, definitely watch these videos here. All right. Yeah. So next time, and again, I'm not going to quiz you or anything like that, but you really should go back through and read through these ones again, especially once you've chosen your topic. Go back through these and see, okay, how can I really take this topic and develop a good working thesis question that's going to lead to my good working thesis, right? So you want to think about all those things and then just kind of read through these again. I mean, they're all really short. It probably wouldn't take you more than 20 minutes to read all of them here. But next time, we're going to keep going with this one. We're going to talk about these ones here. I'll just forget the schedule. So that was all these ones here. If you ever forget which ones we looked over in class, right? So now what you're going to do, really read over the directions again. I can't stress this enough. Read the essay instructions on your own to make sure you fully understand what kind of essay it is and what you have to do for it, right? Then choose your topic and complete a one-page double-space free write on the topic, right? Again, just like we talked about all day today so far, make sure that you can arrive at something that you think you can cover in a 5 to 7 page essay. Make sure it's not so broad you'd have to write a whole book about it. Make sure it's not so specific. You're going to get stuck at 3 pages, right? That happy medium spot there, right? And I say, once you choose a topic, if you can't choose a topic, like if you're looking through this list of topics and you're like, where'd it go? So I get too many things going on here. If you're looking through this list of topics and you're like I kind of like this one. I like media violence, but I also like sweatshops. Well, not like interested in the topic of sweatshops, and I'm also interested in U.S. foreign policy. All right. If you generally can't decide between 3 or 4 topics, you can free write a little bit about each one of them to see if there's one that you like better, if one is more interesting or most interesting, right? On the other hand, if you read through this and you're like, oh, nope, I know what I want to write about. I want to write about patients' rights laws because I'm going to school to be a nurse. And this is a hot topic in one of my classes. I really want to learn more about patients' rights laws and how to better defend patients' rights. That's definitely what I want to write about. Then for your free writing, you already have a topic. Just write about how you might narrow that down, right? So think about what you know about the topic, what you want to find out about the topic, and if you have any personal reactions about the topic, all right? If you're like, I just don't know. I don't know about any of these topics. I don't know what to say. Do some internet searching, right? Feel free to search the internet for ideas, right? You're not cheating. You're just generating ideas for content right now. You're trying to get a good start, and you want to make sure you pick something that you're interested in because you're going to be working on this for the rest of the semester, right? So if you're looking through the list and you're like, I don't know, white collar crime, you could just go to Google, right? What is white collar crime? FBI website. Now I'm being tracked, right? And you can read about white collar crime, corporate fraud, falsification of financial information, corporate insiders, money laundering, right? And then within money laundering, all these ones, they're like, ooh, human trafficking. No, that sounds interesting. Now I think I want to write about that. That's a really cool topic, right? So just by doing some general Google searches, I started looking at white collar crime and I found human trafficking, right? And so you can do that kinds of things to help you find out something you're interested in, right? But I cannot stress this enough. For this essay, you want to make sure that you're choosing something that you really have an interest in, right? Whether it be positive or negatively, right? Maybe you hate missile defense systems across the planet. You hate it. You think it's the worst thing on the planet. Maybe you hate drone strikes. You think they're the most awful thing on the planet and they should be banned, right? Investigate that, write about that, right? Or if you love drones, if you've been in the military and you know for a fact drone attacks have saved so many of your brothers and sisters' lives, then maybe you want to write about that, right? Maybe we should ramp up the drone program in the US. Whatever it is you want to write about, you can write about it, right? But find something that's really interesting to you that you want to write about, that you want to spend time reading more about, right? So for next time, all you have to do is read over the instructions, choose a topic or try to narrow down your topic, and then complete a 1-page double-spaced free writing, right? There really is no limit to this. It's not a formal structure. It's really a free writing. So use this opportunity to just generate ideas, to get thoughts out of your head on the page, to kind of get you in the right mind frame to really begin researching and investigating whatever topic it is that you're choosing, all right? Questions or comments? All right. Well, as always, if you have questions, send me an email. If you have any trouble with anything, let me know. I will be checking my email over the break. So if you have a question, feel free to email me. I'll, try to get back to you as soon as I can. And otherwise, everyone have a great Thanksgiving and try to get some rest.